Disclaimer: it's inspired by reality, shaped by imagination.
What happened when Julia Roberts joined The View to promote her latest project? Nobody expected the conversation to turn into one of the show's most heated cultural debates of the year. The topic? Music. Specifically, whether the rich melodies, soulful lyrics, and craftsmanship of old-school music had been replaced by what Joy Behar called the exciting, fearless energy of today's sound. What began as light-hearted nostalgia quickly spiraled into a personal and generational showdown, one that ended with Julia Roberts standing up, removing her mic, and walking right off the set in front of a stunned live audience. This is the moment the internet can't stop talking about, and how a discussion about music history turned into a clash about values, art, and respect. The morning sun poured through the studio windows as The View's theme music played, the audience clapping and cheering as the hosts took their seats. Joy Behar, in her signature red glasses and mischievous grin, adjusted her papers and glanced down the table at today's special guest. Joining us this morning, Joy began, is an Academy Award-winning actress beloved around the world for her roles in Pretty Woman, Erin Brockovich, and so many more. Please welcome Julia Roberts. The audience erupted in applause as Julia walked on stage, all smiles, waving warmly, before taking her seat. She wore a simple black dress, her hair loose in soft waves, effortlessly elegant, the picture of movie star grace. "Thank you for having me," Julia said, smiling toward the panel. "It's always a pleasure to be here." The opening minutes were breezy and friendly. Julia spoke about her upcoming film, a heartfelt drama about a struggling jazz musician set in the 1960s. She described long hours of research, learning about the music scene back then, the smoky clubs, the live bands, the artistry in every note. "I've always been drawn to the music of that era," Julia said warmly. "It had this sincerity. People wrote from the heart. They played real instruments, and you could feel the humanity in every performance." The co-hosts nodded, but Joy tilted her head slightly, her expression somewhere between curiosity and challenge. "Well, Julia," Joy began with a sly smile, "not to rain on your nostalgia parade, but don't you think every generation says that about their music? People in the 60s said the same thing about the 30s. Maybe you're just showing your age a little." A ripple of laughter moved through the audience. Julia chuckled politely, but there was a faintest shift in her posture, shoulders straightening, eyes narrowing just a fraction. "I think there's a difference," Julia replied evenly. "Back then, music wasn't just a product. It was an art form. People didn't have auto-tune. They didn't need 10 producers to fix a track. You stood in a room with a microphone and you sang. That kind of raw authenticity is rare today." Rare, maybe, but you can't deny the creativity we're seeing now. You've got artists blending genres, pushing boundaries, connecting with audiences all over the world instantly. Old music is beautiful, sure, but it's not the end-all be-all of artistry. The conversation remained civil, but a subtle tension had entered the room. Julia leaned in, her tone thoughtful but firm. "I'm not saying today's music can't be creative," she clarified, "but the speed of production now, the pressure to constantly release something new, it changes the quality. It's harder to pour your soul into a song when you're churning them out like a factory." "Or maybe it's just a different kind of soul, Julia. Maybe you don't get it because you're still listening for a sound that belonged to a world that doesn't exist anymore." The comment earned a small murmur from the audience, some in agreement, others clearly siding with Julia. "Well, Julia," she said, still smiling but with a glint in her eye, "I think that world does still exist, if you know where to look. You just have to care enough to find it." The table went quiet for a beat, each woman holding the other's gaze. Sunny Hostin quickly jumped in to move the segment along, steering the discussion toward memorable concerts from their youth. But even as the laughter picked up again, the undercurrent of that early exchange lingered. Julia's smile remained, but she crossed one leg over the other a little too sharply, as if bracing herself. Joy, meanwhile, kept her grin, but tapped her pen against the table, eyes darting toward Julia now and then with a spark that said she wasn't finished. The cameras cut to commercial, the audience applauded, and backstage crew bustled about. But on the table, something had shifted. A light-hearted discussion had exposed a crack in the conversation, one that would only deepen as the morning went on. When the View returned from commercial, the table was set with coffee mugs, bright smiles, and that deceptive on-air cheerfulness that sometimes hides brewing storms. The next segment was supposed to be a playful one. Old school versus new school. Which music wins? Joy wasted no time. "All right, Julia," she began with that trademark Brooklyn bite. "You think older music is more authentic, more soulful. I say, respectfully, that's a little elitist." The audience reacted with a collective "ooh." Julia raised her brows, clearly surprised. "Elitist?" she repeated, with a small, incredulous laugh. "Yes," Joy pressed on, "you're basically saying that unless music is played live in some smoky bar by a guy with a guitar, it's not real art. That's like saying movies stopped being good when they went digital." Julia's posture stiffened. "I didn't say anything about it not being art. I said it's different. Back then, music had a certain depth, a patience. It wasn't about going viral on TikTok or chasing algorithms. It was about the craft." Joy leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. "And I'm telling you, that's a narrow view. Craft evolves. You think Billie Eilish isn't an artist? You think Kendrick Lamar doesn't have depth? Just because they don't record on analog tape doesn't mean they don't have soul." Julia smiled tightly, her tone sharpening. "I respect them, I really do. But even they would probably tell you they're competing with an attention span problem today. The industry pushes speed over substance. That's not their fault, it's the system. And we've lost something because of it." "Or," Joy countered, "we've gained something. Accessibility, diversity. Anyone can make music now, not just the people with record label connections. More voices, more perspectives. That's progress." The audience applauded, but Julia didn't flinch. She glanced toward the crowd, then back at Joy. "Progress is wonderful, but not when it comes at the expense of quality. We've lowered the bar so far that people think singing in a bathroom with an auto-tune filter is a career. That's not me being elitist. That's me wanting better for the art form I love." Joy's eyes narrowed slightly, her voice lowering. "See, this is the thing with nostalgia. It's dangerous. It makes you romanticize the past and ignore its flaws. You talk about quality. Well, back in the day, a lot of talented artists never even got the chance because the industry was closed off. The good old days weren't good for everybody." The temperature at the table rose. The other co-hosts exchanged glances, sensing where this was headed. "True," Julia said evenly, "but here's the difference. When someone did make it, they were extraordinary. They could sing without help. They could play an instrument without a laptop. The music stayed with you. Today, most of it disappears as fast as it arrives." Joy smirked. "Or maybe you just can't keep up, Julia. Maybe today's music isn't for you, and that's okay." The crowd gave a mix of laughs and gasps. Julia's lips parted in disbelief, a flash of irritation breaking through her otherwise composed exterior. "It's not about keeping up, Joy," she said, leaning in now, her voice quieter but more intense. "It's about recognizing the value of something timeless. You can innovate all you want, but if you strip away the heart, the rest is just noise." The audience was split, some cheering, others shaking their heads. Sunny Hostin tried to jump in. Okay, we're gonna..." But Joy cut her off. You call it noise, I call it evolution." Julia didn't answer right away. She just stared at Joy, her jaw set, as if deciding how far she was willing to go on live television. The cameras panned out for a wide shot, but the tension was unmistakable. This wasn't just a debate anymore. This was turning into a generational showdown, and neither woman seemed willing to back down. The studio lights felt hotter now, though neither Joy nor Julia had moved an inch from their forward-leaning positions. Whoopi, sensing that this was no longer a friendly back and forth, gave the producers a subtle glance. But it was too late. The tension had found its rhythm. Julia took a breath, her voice calm, but laced with something raw. "You know, Joy, I get why you defend the new way. I do. But let me tell you why I hold on to the old music so tightly." The room fell quieter. Even Joy's smirk flattened slightly. "My mother," Julia began, "wasn't a glamorous Hollywood type. She was a waitress who worked double shifts to keep the lights on. But every Sunday morning she'd put on her one good record, Sam Cooke. She'd make pancakes, sing along, and for those couple of hours, life felt safe, stable. I learned every lyric before I could even write my name." She paused, eyes glistening just enough for the high-definition cameras to catch. "When she passed away, suddenly, that record player was the only thing I wanted from the house. And do you know what I realized? You can't stream that kind of memory. You can't swipe past it. It's real because it was lived." The audience murmured sympathetically, a few people nodding slowly. Joy shifted in her chair, clearly not wanting to look like the villain in this moment. "Julia, I'm sorry about your mom, but—" Julia held up her hand, cutting her off, politely but firmly. "Let me finish. I'm not just talking about my mother. I'm talking about a whole generation that had music as the soundtrack to their lives, not just background noise while they scrolled through Instagram. It was personal. And I think we're losing that intimacy." Sunny jumped in softly. "But Juliet, can't that intimacy exist with new music too? A song can go viral and still mean something to someone." "Sure," Julia said, "but does it last? Or is it replaced by another sound of the week 2 days later?" She turned back to Joy. "You think I'm elitist for wanting music to have staying power. I think it's elitist to pretend that disposable culture is just as valuable as something built to endure." Joy's jaw tightened. "No, I think it's elitist to suggest that if something isn't your version of authentic, it doesn't matter. People find meaning in their own ways. The kid making beats in his bedroom might be creating the soundtrack to someone else's life right now, and just because you don't understand it doesn't make it less valid." Julia's eyes narrowed. "And just because you do understand it doesn't make it equal." The crowd reacted with a sharp "ooh." Whoopi held up her hands. "Ladies!" But Julia's voice had dropped into that steady, deliberate register actors use to want the audience to hang on every word. "You know what the real problem is, Joy? We confuse access with value. Yes, it's easier than ever to create, and that's beautiful. But ease doesn't guarantee greatness. Sometimes limits, the kind we had back then, made people dig deeper, work harder, and produce art that still gives you chills 50 years later." Joy leaned back, crossing her arms. "Or maybe limits just kept a lot of people locked out. You're clinging to a past that wasn't as golden as you remember." Julia didn't miss a beat. "And maybe you're defending a present that isn't as brilliant as you want it to be." The studio broke into mixed applause and gasps, the energy now electric. You could almost hear the control room debating whether to cut to commercial. For a split second, Julia and Joy just stared at each other, not with the banter of TV colleagues, but with the unflinching intensity of two women who genuinely, deeply disagreed. Then Julia leaned back, took a sip from her mug, and said quietly but audibly, "Some of us still believe in more than just keeping up." It wasn't a shout, it wasn't a slam, but it landed like a slap in the air. Joy, visibly stung, set her mug down hard enough to make a dull thud against the table. "And some of us believe moving forward is better than living in a scrapbook." The audience roared, half cheering Julia, half siding with Joy. The moment didn't feel like television anymore, it felt personal. And judging by the way Julia's smile faded into something unreadable, this wasn't the last word either of them intended to have. The tension in the studio had turned into something almost physical, a heavy, suffocating air that clung to the audience, the crew, and the panel. Julia Roberts sat forward in her chair, her hands pressed together tightly as if holding herself back from saying something she'd regret. Across from her, Joy Behar wore a smirk that was half triumph, half disbelief, as if she couldn't quite believe Julia was taking this so seriously. "Julia," Joy began again, that sharp New York edge to her tone, "you're acting like new music is the end of civilization. It's entertainment, not a moral crisis. People evolve, styles evolve. This idea that the old way is somehow superior, it's nostalgia, not fact." Julia's eyes flashed. "It's not nostalgia when it's about craft, Joy. It's not about being stuck in the past. It's about musicianship, about taking the time to create something lasting. I've seen artists pour their soul into music without a single computer in the room. Now it's all buttons, clicks, and auto-tune. You can call that evolution. I call it laziness." The audience gasped softly, shifting in their seats. Whoopi raised her hand to intervene, but Joy was already leaning forward. "Laziness? Tell that to the countless young artists working 3 jobs while producing music in their bedrooms, hustling for every stream, every download. They don't have million-dollar studios or record labels throwing money at them. You sound—" Joy stopped herself mid-sentence, but the audience could feel the jab coming. Julia's eyebrows arched. "Go ahead, say it." Joy's voice was almost casual, but the words cut like glass. "You sound elitist, like you've forgotten what it means to start from scratch." A murmur ran through the crowd, and Julia's face shifted, not into anger, but into something sharper, colder. She didn't raise her voice, but every syllable landed like a hammer. "I haven't forgotten, Joy. I remember exactly what it's like. I started as a nobody from Smyrna, Georgia, in an industry that didn't think I had the right look, the right voice, or the right connections. But I fought my way in without tearing down the very art form that inspired me. There's a difference between innovation and abandoning the soul of what came before." Joy scoffed lightly, but Julia leaned closer. "And you want to talk about starting from scratch? Try doing it without mocking the people who came before you. Try doing it without pretending you invented the wheel." The set fell silent. Joy opened her mouth to respond, but Julia suddenly pushed her chair back with a deliberate scrape against the floor. The sound echoed through the studio like a warning shot. "Julia," Whoopi said carefully, "let's take a breath here." But Julia was already standing, her expression unreadable. "No, Whoopi, I'm done. If respecting music means being called elitist, if caring about its history makes me stuck in the past, then I'll gladly wear that label. But I won't sit here and let someone twist my passion into an insult." The audience erupted into a mix of applause and stunned whispers. Joy shifted in her seat, her hands tightening, but she didn't speak. Julia took one last sweeping look at the panel, then turned toward the audience. "To the young artists out there, remember where music came from. It's more than trends. It's more than algorithms. It's art. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for protecting it." And with that, she walked off the set. Not in a flurry of temper, but with the slow, measured steps of someone who knew she'd said exactly what she wanted to say. The camera operators scrambled to adjust, trying to follow her exit while the panel sat frozen. Joy took a sip of her coffee, but her hands trembled slightly. Whoopi finally broke the silence. "Well, we'll be right back." The commercial break felt like an eternity. When the show returned, Julia was gone, her empty chair glaring under the studio lights. Social media was already on fire. Clips of her walk-off racing across Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram, hashtags multiplying by the second. Hashtag Julia Roberts walks out. Hashtag music matters. Hashtag the View meltdown. Backstage, crew members whispered about whether Julia would ever return to the show. But one thing was certain. That moment had just cemented itself in daytime TV history. The morning after Julia Roberts' walk-off, the entertainment world was still buzzing. News outlets replayed the clip on a loop. Talk radio hosts debated who was right, and Twitter was split into two armies, one hailing Julia as a defender of art, the other accusing her of being out of touch. On Good Morning America, the segment ran under the headline, "Julia Roberts versus Joy Behar, When Passion Meets Pride." On TikTok, young musicians stitched the viral clip with their own takes. Some nodded along, saying, "She's right, we're losing the heart of music." Others fired back, "Technology is art, she doesn't get it." Julia, meanwhile, was nowhere to be seen publicly. She stayed quiet, tucked away at her Los Angeles home. No press statements, no Instagram posts, no interviews. Just silence. But inside her sunlit kitchen, she sat at the marble counter with a mug of coffee, scrolling through the endless commentary. She saw teenagers defending her with surprising eloquence, quoting her exact words. "It's more than trends. It's more than algorithms. It's art." She saw others tearing her apart, calling her a Hollywood relic and out of touch with the real world. Her sister Lisa called mid-scroll. "You okay?" Lisa asked gently. I laughed softly. "It depends on which headline you're reading." "You knew this was going to blow up. You've been in this business long enough." "Yeah," Julia said, her eyes drifting to the sunlight on the floor. "I just didn't expect to feel so raw about it." She wasn't upset at Joy personally, not really. It was the deeper thing, the gnawing ache that came from realizing how fast the culture she loved was shifting, and how powerless she felt to slow it down. She had walked off because she refused to dilute that conviction for the sake of a tidy TV segment. Meanwhile, The View's PR machine was spinning. Producers hinted that Joy and Julia had mutual respect and that things got heated in the spirit of debate. Joy, back on air the next day, offered a half smile and said, "We're all passionate about what we love." Julia made her point and made her exit. That's showbiz. The internet, of course, didn't buy the tidy wrap-up. Entertainment podcasts dissected every second of body language. One viral YouTube analysis titled, "Julia Roberts' Walk-Off Wasn't About Music, It Was About Respect," racked up 2 million views in 48 hours. Music legends like Stevie Nicks and Elton John publicly weighed in, supporting Julia's point about preserving musical integrity. By the end of the week, Julia finally broke her silence. In a short Instagram video filmed in her backyard, she appeared makeup-free, wearing a soft sweater, her voice steady but unpolished. "I've read a lot these past few days. Some of it's been beautiful, some of it's been, well, less so. I didn't walk off because I couldn't handle disagreement. I walked off because sometimes staying in a conversation that's not listening becomes a waste of breath. I care deeply about music, about the people who make it, and about its history. That's all." The video ended there. No apology, no escalation. Just a firm reminder that she wasn't retreating from her stance. The reaction was instant. Millions liked the post. Comments poured in from both fans and critics. Young artists posted videos thanking her for saying what nobody else in Hollywood will. Older fans called her a class act for refusing to get into a mudslinging match. Joy never responded directly, but The View subtly invited Julia back for a special reunion episode. Julia politely declined. Months later, the walk-off was still being cited in articles about celebrity authenticity and the state of the music industry. Even people who disagreed with her couldn't deny that her exit was iconic. The image of her pushing back her chair, delivering that last message to young artists, and walking out with quiet dignity became a meme, a gif, a cultural reference point. Julia herself summed it up best in a rare interview months later. "I didn't walk out to win. I walked out because I had nothing left to give that conversation. Sometimes your silence or your exit is the loudest thing you can say." It wasn't the ending the producers wanted, but it was the ending Julia Roberts chose.